Welcome back. You're listening to a special edition of Ask the CIO, sponsored by Kodak Alaris on Federal News Network. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guests today are Lawrence Brewer, the Chief Records Officer for the U.S. Government at the National Archives and Records Administration, and Lisa Harlampus, the Director of Records Management Policy and Outreach, also at NARA. So, Lawrence, you mentioned in the last segment about this idea of the change or the need to evolve what a records management means, the skill sets needed to be successful. I want to start there because I think the workforce piece that comes up with this is so important to meeting the goals of the OMB memo from 2019, but also these long-term goals that we've been talking about now for 15 or so years. So walk me through a little bit about what you're seeing, or what as you're talking to agencies, what types of skill sets are more necessary today than maybe they were 5 or even 10 years ago?
So that's a great question. And obviously, we're no longer working in an environment where we have records managers sitting in the basement, checking in and checking out paper records from a file room. So we need to make sure that we are set up as records managers and agencies for success. And what that means increasingly is a level of skill and knowledge about electronic records management, which we are still developing as a government. And we have really tried to focus on this going back to the 2012 directive and in the current directive as well, where there are key targets which are assigned to the Office of Personnel Management to identify what those competencies are to create that progressive modern workforce that is adept with electronic records. It's something that we continue to talk about. It's something that we continue to work on through our own training at NARA in providing the kind of content around the skills for managing electronic records to a much greater degree than we have done before. We also expect that agencies are doing the same in terms of issuing policies, directives, and support for staff to be able to get the kind of training and connect in a much more constructive and productive way with their colleagues and peers who are working in the office of the CIO or working in a chief data officer's office, to be able to talk the language and to understand what the concerns are and how records management can support the mission of the agencies, especially from that perspective of really managing electronic records more consistently, effectively, and efficiently than we have before.
I'll throw it back out to both of you, Lawrence or Lisa, because I'm not sure who the best person is for this one. But when it comes to the training and the training that NARA provides, has NARA seen a huge increase in the number of people coming to your training or accessing your training online, not just during this pandemic when we're all working from home, but just over the last year and a half or so? Again, I know Lisa does outreach, but Lawrence, since you're the Chief Records Officer, I know has a better view of that.
I'll start, and Lisa, by all means, feel free to chime in. I mean, we have really focused on training, and one of the things that we know for a fact, whenever we go out and talk to agencies, whether it's at a big agency meeting or at a meeting on site with an agency, training always comes up. Questions about training comes up. There's no shortage in the desire for agency staff to get more training about how to do electronic records management. So we have focused on it. We have moved all of our training content online. All of it is available on a catalog on our public website. And part of what we have really focused on in the last couple of years is widening access to the content that we have developed about electronic records management to all of our agency customers. And we're always looking to where we might need to get ahead of the curve. I mean, where we might need to provide training to really support the continuing development of electronic records management in agencies around the various tools that agencies are using. So we're always collecting that data, and we're always trying to make sure that the community that we work with, the records officers, are in a good place in terms of having what they need to be able to interact with their colleagues within their own agencies.
And I could add to that as well. I want to really emphasize how NARA changed its training program in the past 2 years. In the past, in the recent past, before 2 years ago, staff would come to our facilities. We did in-person training, and we trained thousands. It was in the thousands of people a year on different parts of records management. And it was very systemic. So we'd take you from, you know nothing to you leave the course 5 days later and you've got a real good overview. And I think it's representative of what we're talking about with the transition to digital government, that we've sort of said, in-person training isn't we could do more, we could be more effective. We need to rethink the whole approach. So by offering the training content online through a variety of tools, anybody can go and take the part and go into the training that they need at that time. So you talked about the type of skills people need. I would categorize it in some broad ways. Sometimes the skills and the retooling that records professionals need is understanding in depth the types of tools that are being used to create records and information and data at their agencies to accomplish the mission. Because if you can't talk about geographic information systems, or you don't know the ins and outs of how email actually works, then you're at a disadvantage when you're trying to have conversations about management. On the other hand, some records and information professionals are changing their skill sets to be able to actually use their tools. A lot of times, records are created, but they're not necessarily stored in the system that they were created. Some parts get deleted and some parts of that information get moved and kept in other cloud storage environments and other things to say, I need to hold this information for 15 years. I have to be able to, maintain it, migrate it over time and make sure that the controls are in place. So they need both training on the tools and information that's being used, the tools that they need for today, and constantly looking how to improve it. How do we get into machine learning and RPA so that robotic process automation, so that we in records management are on the cutting edge, and we're taking advantage of the best tools to be more efficient and effective in what we do.
And I think that's the other key piece to this discussion let's hit upon is there are new tools, there are new technologies. In many ways, managing your records is easier, but more complex if it can be both, because the tools make things easier, but also you have to understand how the tools work and how to apply them the right way. Is that maybe a trend you're starting to see in terms of agencies using more technology, but then needing to play a little bit of catch up to understand how to use the technology in the most efficient, effective way to manage their records?
So I'll start just by saying that technology and the use of technology is a given. I mean, there's absolutely no way of getting around it, and agencies need to figure out the best way to apply it. One of the things that we've seen in the data that we've received from agencies is that resources, as we've said before, is a continuing challenge, and agencies are in different places in terms of, where they can get the financial resources to procure new technology and the staff to be able to do it well. So one of the trends that we have seen is that agencies are, where they are able to, trying to leverage the technology that they already have in-house. A good example of that is what agencies have already done in applying the capstone approach to managing email by managing email within the live system and then putting controls around it. Other areas such as Microsoft Office 365, agencies are working out how to configure Office 365 to support record keeping and provide some record keeping functionality. And I think that's what a lot of agencies are looking at, is like, what can we do on an enterprise-wide basis, leveraging the tools that we have? And if we can't do that, or if we have an opportunity to procure something, what is the best way to go about doing that and gather the data that we need to be able to do it effectively?
And I'd like to add along those thoughts that Lawrence is, hit the nail on the head, that one of the ways to look at the trends is, agencies don't create records for the sake of record keeping. Records are the byproduct of an agency that's conducting its mission. And although we sometimes like to focus on what's unique about an agency's mission, a lot of times records covers everything from the unique records of the mission to the administrative side of the house. So sometimes there's a lot of value in doing records administration for payroll, travel, hiring, firing. These are not glamorous parts of running an organization, but they need to be managed as in addition to the special and unique things that an agency is doing, giving grants, developing, I don't even want to, I can't even begin. There's too much to talk about the government does that's unique and special. But those are the things that I think are the trends, is to sort of say, in some respects, agencies are able to leverage shared services and shared service technology to help get the administrative stuff under control, so we don't have to spend as much time thinking about that. And then our resources that are extremely limited can be focused on managing what is unique. What is it that, you know, we've either developed tools specifically to accomplish, or the records have unique preservation aspects that we'd be like, well, you know, this is special because it's not a common thing that shared services can take care of. I'd be happy to discuss shared services some more as well.
You hit upon one of my favorite topics. How'd you know? Well, first we're going to take a quick break, and we come back, maybe then we'll talk a little bit about shared services. I'm Jason Miller, and you're listening to a special edition of Ask the CIO, sponsored by Kodak Alaris on Federal News Network.